On our newscast tonight, Pope Francis lands in Korea and addresses a nation at the presidential office of Cheong Wa Dae, placing emphasis on the pursuit of peace through open dialogue and mutual respect. We'll take a look at his jam-packed schedule and the positive impact this momentous visit will have on the nation. North Korea launches 5 projectiles into the East Sea. This after expressing their frustration with upcoming South Korea-U.S. joint drills and asking that Seoul follow specific guidelines to improve inter-Korean ties. And after its monthly monetary meeting, the Bank of Korea lowers its key interest rate to 2.25%, joining a government-led campaign to spur growth in the wobbly economy. Join us for these and more on Early Edition at 6.
It's August 14th, 6 in the evening on a Thursday here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Nahyun Kyung.
And I'm Daniel Chen. Thank you for joining us. We begin with the Pope's visit to Korea. When he arrived this morning, he was greeted by a number of officials, including President Park Geun-hye herself. Just an hour ago, the two gave speeches at the presidential office of Cheong Wa Dae following talks.
In his remarks, the Pope stressed the importance of creating peace on the Korean peninsula for the sake of future generations. It was a sentiment President Park also echoed in her speech. Take a look.
To hand on to them. In this context, I think it is especially important for us to reflect on the need to give our young people the gift of peace. This appeal has all the more resonance here in Korea, a land which has long suffered because of a lack of peace. Korea's quest for peace is a cause close to our hearts, for it affects the stability of the entire area and indeed of our whole war-weary world.
교황님께서 주시는 격려의 메시지를 통해 아시아의 젊은이들이 희망의 미래를 발견하는 소중한 시간이 되기를 기원합니다. 앞으로 한국 정부도 우리가 받았던 따뜻한 도움의 손길을 기억하면서 꿈과 희망을 세계 인류와 나누기 위해 지속적으로 노력해 나갈 것입니다.
And for more, we are going to connect to our presidential office correspondent, Choi Yusun.
Yusun, what else can you tell us about the meeting between the Pope and President Park?
Hyun-kyung and Daniel, following talks with Pope Francis, President Park talked about his will to bring peace and reconciliation onto the divided Korean peninsula and said that his latest visit would open an era of reunification here on the peninsula. President Park, who back in March proposed increasing humanitarian exchanges, humanitarian aid rather, to the north and people-to-people exchanges between the two sides to better prepare for reunification, said Pyongyang, for its part, should stop its nuclear weapons development. She then asked Pope Francis to continue praying for those in conflict to forgive, those divided to unite, and for Koreans to work toward a unified Korea. Pope Francis recognized efforts here in South Korea to achieve reconciliation and stability on the peninsula and talked about the importance of understanding and cooperation in achieving peace. Pope Francis, who is dedicated to the societies marginalized and those in suffering, then said not meeting their immediate needs, but assisting with their human and cultural advancement so that their voice too can be heard should be the main goal. The Pope affirmed the Church's commitment to helping Koreans better educate their children and strengthen solidarity within Korean society. Guys?
Well, Yusun, we've been hearing about his schedule, so tell us more about what we can expect in the coming days.
On the papal itinerary for the rest of the week are officiating a mass to celebrate the Assumption of the Virgin Mary on Friday in the central city of Daejeon and beatifying 124 Korean martyrs in downtown Seoul on Saturday. There will also be two other masses, one on Sunday to mark the closing of the 6th Asian Youth Day and the final one on Monday on peace and reconciliation to be held in Seoul's Myeongdong Cathedral. The Pope, who values looking after the vulnerable and those in suffering, is also expected to meet with the families of April's deadly ferry disaster victims and Korean victims of Japan's wartime sex slavery during his trip. With President Park due to speak on Friday to mark Korea's liberation from Japan's colonial rule, it will be interesting to see what message the president makes concerning Japan's repeated denials of past atrocities and ways to improve bilateral ties. This was Choi Yu-sun reporting on Pope Francis's visit to Korea, and I'll be back with more details on our next newscast.
All right, thank you, Yu-sun. And as she just said, Saturday's beatification ceremony by the Pope will surely be one of the highlights of his visit.
The more than 200 years of history of the Korean Catholic Church would not have been possible without the sacrifices of a great many martyrs.
And our Lee Ji-yeon went to a site in the southwestern city of Jeonju where those sacrifices all began.
Chungdong Catholic Church, sitting in a labyrinth of traditional Korean structures, is built on the grounds where Korea's first Catholic martyr, Po Yoon-ji-chung, lost his life.
I always remember this place as having strong historical roots, and as I attend Mass, I try to continue on that spirit of sacrifice.
This 83-year-old church was literally built on a foundation of blood. Chungdong Church's cornerstones come from the old palace ruins where Martyr Yoon was killed.
These stones are from the site where there was great bloodshed of so many martyrs. They were pulled apart to death, and the stones from the 1791 and 1801 persecutions lie from here to all the way over there.
Korea's early believers in the 18th and 19th century during the Joseon dynasty had to fight against the ruling class and deeply rooted teachings of Confucianism. This included giving up ancestral rituals and embracing equality across all social classes, widely seen as a challenge to the existing social hierarchy. Until religious freedom was granted in 1887 in the country, thousands fled persecution but lost their lives. And of them, 124 will be beatified during Pope Francis's visit, including Korea's first martyr, Yoon. But not many visiting Chungdong Church are aware of the significance the place holds. They're mostly tourists who come to admire the Romanesque architectural masterpiece with beautiful domes and simple but commanding lines. They are also mostly unaware of the irony of the church's location, which makes it all the more meaningful, because it sits right across Gyeonggi-jeon, a landmark where the portrait of the Joseon dynasty founder is enshrined.
The royals, such as King Cheong-jo, who persecuted Catholics, are remembered there. But we built our grounds here with the belief that making peace as we sit side by side is most important.
And that idea of peace and reconciliation is a powerful message that extends beyond the boundaries of this religious landmark. Lee Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Now, it's not just the Chungdong Cathedral, but there are many other sites throughout the nation that hold special meaning in Korean Catholicism.
Right, the unique history of Korean Catholicism here is said to have been one of the reasons why Pope Francis chose Korea as his first Asian nation to visit.
And for more on his visit, we are joined live in the studio by Father Ramiro Zuniga from the Guadalupe Missioners. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Father, let's begin with this question. The papal visit to Korea is a third of its kind in Korean history. What significance does this most recent trip hold?
I think he recognized the Catholic faith in Korean people, especially the sacrifice they made in the beginning of the church. Now, being again here, he's talking that the church count the sacrifice they did for us.
And Pope Francis certainly has a lot that he will have to do during the 5-day visit. What meaning do the sanctuaries that he will be visiting over those 5 days hold?
Then is remember the origins of the church in Korea. And then now in the past, but even now in the present, as you know, there is places where people are not free to choose the religion. Then I think now it's meaningful to say to people, every one of us is free to choose religion.
Okay, well, one thing great about the Pope is that he does make non-believers want to convert to Catholicism, if according to some people. He's very down to earth, definitely different from his predecessors. Where do you think that quality comes from?
I think his formation. As you know, he's a Jesuit priest, always close to the people and Latin America. Then he's used to work with the people and be with the people. If some people think he's trying to convert people, it's wrong, because he wants only to be friend with people. That's the most important.
Do you think the history of the Korean Catholics, that the unique history that Korean Catholics have, really was one of the reasons why the Pope chose Korea as his first Asian nation to come to?
As you know, it's happened that it will be the ceremony for beatification, but 124 Korean martyrs. Then it was the youth meeting in Asia as well, and he accepted to come here to recognize the job and the work and the sacrifice of many Koreans in the history of the church.
And he just, about an hour ago, he delivered the message of peace and reconciliation. For the rest of his stay, what do you think the Korean public would expect to get? What message do you think the Korean public would want to hear from him?
I think most of this hope that it's possible for us to make a new society. Is not to live in hardship only or hating each other. It's to say we can change and we can live better if we don't forget the ones that are going down when we are in an economic growth or in a happiness. You cannot forget the other people.
Just briefly before we let you go, how do you think the world is viewing his visit to Korea as of now, so far?
I think everybody is happy because he's a man who shared the hope in the world, and now coming to Korea is telling us the church is not only Europe, is not only Middle East, it's even in Asia and later in Africa or South America or all America.
Well, I certainly hope the security will be not so tight as to keep the people distanced from the Pope during his visit to Korea. Well, that's all the time we have for you. Unfortunately, we'll have to let you go. Father Ramiro Zuniga from the Guadalupe Missioners, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
A one-day entry ban. 77.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with experts on the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best. With Na Hyung-kyung and Daniel Che.
Arirang News. Arirang News.
On Early Edition at 6.
Moving on to other news stories, Korea's central bank has cut its key rate by 1/4 percentage point after holding it steady for the last 14 months.
That's right. The move is in line with the government's expansionary policy aimed at revitalizing the economy, which is facing threats of further slowdown. For details, we connect to our economics correspondent Hwang Ji-hye at the news center. So Ji-hye, the bank seems to be joining government efforts to spur growth.
Definitely. The Bank of Korea lowered its key interest rate to 2.25% today, and that marks the first rate cut by the central bank since May last year. It cited the sluggish domestic demand brought on by the ferry disaster in April and the business and consumer sentiment that continues to worsen. The central bank's move comes after the government unveiled a set of aggressive stimulus measures last month, including additional fiscal spending of roughly $11.5 billion. Governor Lee Ji-yeol says the cut is a preemptive measure to stop the economy from slowing further while inflationary pressure is low.
The rate cut, together with the government stimulus measures, is expected to improve consumer sentiment and contribute to maintaining growth momentum.
Well, where there is light, there is shadow. There are growing concerns about the independence of the central bank and that the rate cut could worsen the nation's household debt problem. What did the governor have to say about it, Jie?
Daniel, the governor defended the Bank of Korea's neutrality, saying it does not make decisions that run counter to their assessments of current economic conditions, although he actually admitted that the rate cut will lead to more household debt, which currently stands at roughly $980 billion. He said the level is manageable for now and that we should not focus on the total amount of debt. Instead, he said the focus should be on how fast the debt level is growing compared to that of income, and that's why the market expects further rate cuts down the road.
Which means that if this rate cut does not boost the consumption, we'll likely get another rate cut from the BOK. And we think that another rate cut will likely come by the end of this year.
All right, so indeed, whether that rate cut will come by the end of the year, as Michael says, we'll have to wait and see for that. Thank you, Jihye, for your report. That was our Hwang Jihye reporting live from the News Center. Now, North Korea still has not given an answer to South Korea's offer of dialogue. Instead, the regime has upped its threats, calling on Seoul to cancel an upcoming joint military exercise with Washington and to lift sanctions on Pyongyang. Our Unification Ministry correspondent Hwang Sung-hee reports.
Without giving a response to South Korea's recent proposal for talks, North Korea on Thursday laid out specific measures Seoul should take to improve inter-Korean ties. In a statement, the North's agency in charge of inter-Korean relations called on the South to cancel the Ulji Freedom Guardian military exercises with the United States, saying that a failure to do so would push the Korean peninsula to the brink of war. The annual military drills, which Pyongyang calls practice for an invasion, are scheduled to begin August 18th. The Committee for Peaceful Reunification of Korea urged the South to remove what they said were unreasonable institutional mechanisms blocking the contact, visits, cooperation, and exchange between the North and the South, a reference to a set of sanctions imposed on Pyongyang following the sinking of the South Korean warship Cheonan in 2010. An official at South Korea's Unification Ministry said the ministry does not feel the need to address such demands by the North and said Pyongyang should accept Seoul's proposal for talks if it really wants improved inter-Korean ties. South Korea proposed high-level talks next Tuesday to discuss a range of pending issues, including a possible round of reunions for families separated by the Korean War. Although the North remains tight-lipped on the offer, it did note the South Korean government should demonstrate its desire for improved ties through practical actions rather than in words. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
And we are getting reports that North Korea has asked South Korea to extend the working hour of their Panmunjom communication channel, saying it has a quote-unquote message to deliver within today. It would most likely be about Seoul's offer of dialogue, and we will get to those details to you as the story develops. But North Korea appears to be putting its words into action. Pyongyang has fired a total of 5 short-range projectiles into the East Sea this Thursday, 3 in the morning shortly before the Pope's arrival, and 2 more in the afternoon. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff says the 5 are 300mm rockets with a range of around 200 kilometers. It's the 17th time that the regime has test-fired projectiles this year, and the 6th time it has shot off this particular type of artillery rocket. Military sources say they are closely monitoring the situation for any further provocation, adding that the North appears to be testing their missile range. Now, Indonesia's top diplomat says North Korea has come up with a specific and concrete proposal that could reduce tensions on the Korean peninsula. Indonesian Foreign Minister Marty Natalegawa met with his North Korean counterpart Lee Soo-yong in Jakarta on Wednesday, and while he didn't offer specifics about what the proposal entailed, the Indonesian minister said it involved issues that have been, quote, preoccupying all of us, end quote, including nuclear proliferation, ballistic missile launches, and military drills. He also gave no indication of when the proposal might be made, but during their talks, Lee also passed along an invitation from North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to the newly elected Indonesian President Joko Widodo to visit the North. Widodo reportedly responded positively to the offer.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has clarified America's Asia-Pacific strategy. He says it does not and will not take sides in any of the maritime conflicts that have gripped the region in recent years. Here's our Connie Lee with this report.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry made it clear that improving U.S. cooperation with China was important to maintain stability in the Asia-Pacific region. Speaking on Asia policy at the East-West Center in Honolulu on Wednesday, Kerry also mentioned that the U.S. does not take positions on the territorial disputes in the South and East China Seas. In light of the sovereignty questions, he stated that the U.S. firmly opposes the use of intimidation or force to assert a claim. Kerry reiterated instead that all parties must work together to solve the claims through peaceful means. He continued to say that these principles bind all nations equally, and all nations have a responsibility to uphold them. Kerry also strongly emphasized that the U.S. will continue to work toward promoting human rights and democracy in Asia. He specifically mentioned that the concentration camps in North Korea should be shut down immediately.
Such deprivation of human dignity just has no place in the 21st century. North Korea's gulag should be shut down, not tomorrow, not next week, but now.
He added that Pyongyang's proliferation activities pose a serious threat to the United States and to the world. Kerry's speech in Honolulu wrapped up an 8-day around-the-world diplomatic tour, which included the ASEAN and East Asia summit meetings. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
More on the Ebola outbreak. The World Health Organization has designated Kenya as a high-risk country for the spread of Ebola. Located in eastern Africa, Kenya is a major transport hub with more than 70 flights per week from West Africa. Nairobi has yet to announce flight bans to and from the 4 affected West African states. This as new figures from the WHO show the death toll now standing at 1,069. There were 128 new cases and 56 new deaths reported this past Sunday and Monday. Liberia was the worst hit with 32 new Ebola deaths. Meanwhile, Canada says it will donate up to 1,000 doses of its test medication, following a WHO clearance to use experimental drugs in the fight against this deadly virus.
So we've had some gloomy weather all throughout the week, but hopefully things will clear up for the beatification ceremony, the big event scheduled on Saturday.
Well, let's ask the big question to Michelle Park, standing at the Weather Center. So, is there any sun in the forecast, Michelle?
Well, good evening. Currently, it's raining heavily in both Chungdong provinces and the southern regions, and we are expecting 20 millimeters per hour of rain from now through midnight with chances of thunder and lightning. Now, tomorrow is a Liberation Day here in Korea, and we can expect another rainy day all across the nation with the exception of Seoul, where we'll have mostly cloudy skies with temperatures lingering into the 30s. Now, unfortunately, it looks like the rain will be a theme throughout the Pope Francis's visit, although it looks like things will stay dry for the beatification ceremony on Saturday. Now, going over to our temperature readings, Seoul will top out the Friday morning at 22 before reaching up to 30 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Daegu and Busan will top both at 26 degrees. And moving over to other regions, Jeju Island tops over to 27, while Dokdo hits 23, while Mangkang tops out to 25. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and back to you guys.
Well, thank you very much for that, Michelle, and that's all we have for you at this hour. Thank you for staying with us, and if you're watching from similar time zones, good night. And if you're watching from outside of Korean time zone, we wish you a great day ahead. This has been Daniel Chang.
And I'm Na Hyun-kyung, and Arirang will have a special broadcast of Korea's Liberation Day ceremony tomorrow, as well as continuous coverage of Pope Francis' stay in Korea. So make sure you do stay with Arirang.
Hyun-kyung and I do have the privilege of joining you again with the coverage of Sunday's special Mass.
Good evening.